Summertime is the perfect time to start quilting for the holidays. It may seem super early, but fall is going to be around the corner. This is our fourth Halloween mystery quilt along. So far we've done Bats and Boos, Boo Crew, Haunted Halloween, and now we're here with Spooky and Sweet. I know all of you out there love purple, so this Halloween quilt is going to deliver that for you. Your first step is going to go to fatquartershop.com and you're going to download your fabric requirements. What your fabric requirements have is all of the Bella Solids that are used in the kit, or you can use fabrics from your stash. Then you're going to go back and download block 1 for this week, and then next week you'll download block 2, and so on and so forth. Now this year we have two finishing options. You can either finish this in a door banner or a wall hanging. And if you love cross stitch, we're also offering a free Spooky and Sweet pattern series to stitch along with your quilt. So now that you have everything downloaded, your fabric ready, let's get started and let's make Witchy Ghost, which is part 1. When you're looking at your fabric requirements, you're going to need 1 1/8 yards of your background and border, 5/8 yard of a light, a fat eighth of a gray, a fat quarter of a black and 2 oranges, a fat eighth of a green, a fat quarter of purple, 1/2 yard of your binding, and 2 1/8 yards of backing. Now, since this is Bella Solids, you can easily switch out your purple for a pink or your green for another gray. This quilt would be really easy to switch your fabrics if there's one fabric you don't love. So in the intro, we did talk about you have two different placement options. One is a table topper that is going to be square, and one is more of a table runner, which is more rectangular. But whatever one you're going to do, you're going to make one of these. So today you don't really have to make that decision on which one you're doing. You're just going to make this block. Now if you look at our cutting, there are a jillion pieces. So we have all the way from A to Z, and then double A to double EE. I would suggest cutting your fabrics and labeling them with your alphabetes. If you don't have alphabetes, you could use sticky notes, but something to label them because you have a lot of individual pieces. Now this block, I would say, is a confident beginner. If you can do corner squares or 1/4 inch seams, you can do this block. You just have to go slowly. So let's walk through the steps of this block. So we're going to start on page 2. We're going to pull our fabric D rectangle, and we're going to take our fabric Y square, and I'm just pulling off of those design boards. And then what you're going to do is draw a line from corner to corner on the wrong side of the fabric. That's black, but on this, just so you know, this is solids, and solids do not have a right or wrong side. Now here, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see, so you could use a white chalk pencil if you wanted. You're going to stitch directly on that line, trim a 1/4 inch away, and press. And in the pattern, you'll see these arrows. The arrows are the direction you press. So you're going to press that towards your black. You're going to make one of those. Then you're going to pull your fabric B and a fabric X square, and you can see I'm just pulling straight from my board. You're going to do that same thing. Draw a line from corner to corner, place it right here, pin it in place, and stitch directly on the line. Now here you really just want to pay attention to which direction it is because it's this direction. You're going to stitch on that line, trim a 1/4 inch away, and you're going to make one of these. So those are your first 2 units you're going to make, and that is just called a corner square unit. Super easy. Now we're going to move to the next step. Now we're going to take a fabric W and a fabric EE rectangle, take both of those, put them right sides together, stitch a 1/4 inch away, and you're going to press towards your black, and it's going to look like this. So you can see we've pressed to the black. Now we're going to take a fabric A square, which is gray, and we're going to draw a line from corner to corner. I'm using a friction pin. It will disappear with heat later. You can use any type of marking tool that's meant for quilting. The friction pin is actually not meant for quilting, but it is what I use. What I want to point out here is this is a pretty big square. So if you don't pin, it is going to shift. That's just the nature of fabric and sewing. So you can see I have 4 pins in place. I'm gonna use an open toe foot and I'm gonna stitch directly on this line. And there is kind of a method, some people stitch a little bit to the right. I don't do that, I stitch directly on the line. Today I'm using the Aurifil color 2600, which is a light gray, so that it will blend in with my gray and my black. Once you're done sewing, then you can remove your pins. So now you can see that gray, it blends in nicely. You just want to make sure you don't have anything white, because white will really show up on the black. You're going to trim 1/4 inch away, you're going to discard this, and you're going to press this way. I'm going to show you how to press. I did want to give you a tip though. If you pull your fabric right here, the key is that you should not see your thread, and you can't see your thread, so you know we're working with a good color. So when I pressed, I set my seam and just press this over. You want to make sure this stays rectangular, and if you move your iron too much, it will become wavy. So you're going to make one of these. All the pieces so far, we've just made one. Now we're on the second column. You're going to take a fabric Z rectangle and a fabric I square. Put those right sides together, pin, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and you're going to press that towards your black, and it's going to look like this. Then we'll start taking all the pieces we've made and join them all back together. So we've got, this is the second piece we made, this is the first piece we made, and then we're going to take a fabric F rectangle. So now we have 4 pieces, and we want to make sure we've got them all the right direction. What I'm going to do is put these right sides together, pin in place, and we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm also going to put this right sides together, and there are no seams in the middle that need to line up, so we don't have to do anything extra. We're just going to sew these with a 1/4 inch seam and press. So I previously used an open toe foot to do the corner square. I'm going to now switch to a 1/4 inch foot with a guide because it makes sewing really easy. Now I'm going to set my seam, which means just place my iron nice and flat before I press. Press to one side and press to the other. I'm going to pin all the way across several times, and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. And this is super easy. What I would suggest on any fat quarter shop or It's Sew Emma patterns, you can just follow. You don't even really have to read the instructions because we put it in full color. And as long as you label with the alphabets, you should be able to follow this super easily. So 1/4 inch seam and then press. So this is the witch's hat for our ghost. We're going to set that aside and just keep going. Now we're going to kind of move down the block and go from the hat into the face. Now we're going to take a fabric M square, one fabric BB rectangle. We're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam and press. Then we're going to take a fabric L rectangle, attach that with a 1/4 inch seam, and this is going to be your left face unit, so you can kind of see his eye. Then you're going to take another fabric BB, a fabric O square, and a fabric N rectangle, and you're going to do the same thing. Sew with a 1/4 inch seam, press, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, press, and then you're going to get your right face unit. So you have your left face unit, which should be 4.5 by 5.5, and your right face unit, which should be 3.5 by 4.5. And now we've completed page 2. Let's move to page 3. So now we're going to make a flying geese, which is super easy. You're going to take 2 fabric R squares. We're going to draw a line from corner to corner on 2 different squares. We're going to take a fabric BB square, and we are going to make a flying geese. With a small piece like this, I like to use seam align glue to put that together. Now what I do is I put 3 small dots. You don't need to use as much as I use. I tend to use too much. I'm going to stitch on that line. The reason I don't use pins with something this small is I feel like it distorts my seam allowance. So I'm going to stitch directly on this line. I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch away, and then I'm going to press this towards the white. And that is this step right here. Now we're going to take the other square, put it on the other side. I like to place it where all 4 sides are laid correctly and then add the glue and then stitch on that line. Trim a 1/4 inch away again and press. So you have your smile unit made, which is your flying geese. Then you're going to take your fabric in rectangle, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and this is going to be your center face unit. So you're going to take your center face unit and then your right face unit and your left face unit, and we're going to sew those together. So luckily I don't have any seams that need to match or nest, so I'm just going to put this right sides together, pin in place. I always pin at the top and the bottom and then within at least once. So I'm going to sew this, press, and then I'm going to add this to the next piece. So you're going to switch back to your 1/4 inch foot. And luckily I didn't chop off that point, so that's good news. And then I'm going to add the right side. And I do tend to have a lot of pin caddies around, so that I have one at my cutting table and one at my sewing table and one at my ironing table. You're just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. And I'm super excited because I didn't chop off any of these points. So now you have your face unit, and you have 2 fabric P rectangles. You're going to add one to the top and one to the bottom, and we're going to do that same thing, right sides together, pin and sew. My tip for pinning is you pin at one end, the other end, and then you just pin throughout. I'm going to do that on the top and the bottom. Super easy. Sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we're going to press towards the rectangles. And then that will be your head unit. So we're on page 3. We're going to take fabric BB rectangles, fabric U rectangles, and fabric Q squares. We're going to be doing these top 2 steps. And what I'm going to do is just show you how to lay it out. So your top one has your U on the left, Q on the top, and BB on the bottom. So that's going to be your left hand. Your right hand is going to be opposite. It's going to be Q, BB, and then U. So you can see they reverse. So what I'm going to do is leave these on the design board, pin these 2 in place, sew these together. Then I'm going to show you how to use the quick press seam roller so you don't have to go to the iron before you add the second piece. So when I'm sewing off of a design board, I'm just going to sew, put it right where it was on the design board. I'm going to press this towards the black, and this seam press roller is going to get it nice and flat so I don't have to go all the way to the iron for such a small piece. And I've put them back on my design board the way they go, and I'm going to pin and sew these together with a 1/4 inch seam. So now we have our left hand and our right hand. It's funny because they kind of look like ghost eyes, but they're not. They're the hands. You'll have to just trust me on that. Then you're going to take your fabric AA, which is a rectangle. Then you're going to take your fabric T, which is also a rectangle. Pin those together, sew those with a 1/4 inch seam. So this is going to be your partial handle unit. And what I want to show you is if you've pressed according to the pattern, your seams are going to nest because we have our left hand, our right hand, and if you flip those over, your seams are opposite directions. So you can see this seam goes to the black, this goes to the black, and this goes to the black. So what I'll do is I'll put this one right sides together and I'm going to nest these together. So I'm just going to push from the left to the right and it'll just lock. Put a pin there first, pin at the beginning and the end, just like you've been doing. And if you've cut accurately, all of this should be coming out really nice and straight. And just so you know, when you're working with solids, you can see mistakes a little bit easier, so don't get upset if you're seeing mistakes, whereas when you're working with prints, you don't. And what I wanted to show you is all your seams should be nice and flat. There shouldn't be any bumps or anything. So this is your handle unit. Now we're gonna move a little bit to the right and we're gonna start working on the pumpkin. The next one is super easy. You're just gonna take 2 fabric DD rectangles and 2 fabric CC rectangles, pin, and you're going to make 1 pumpkin unit. Super easy. It's gonna look like this and it should measure 5.5 by 8.5. So now that we have finished page 3, we're gonna move to page 4 and we're gonna be adding corner squares to our pumpkins. We're gonna take 2 fabric VV squares, a fabric R square, and a fabric J square. And here you just wanna be careful because on the top, you're gonna have gray, dark gray. On the bottom left, you're gonna have white, and the bottom right, you're gonna have a light gray. What we're gonna do is draw a line from corner to corner on all of these. And then I'm going to use the seam align glue and just put a tiny bit of glue. And when you're laying this down, if you lay it right on that corner, you're going to get really nice results. Now, another thing to notice with this glue is if you let it dry, you'll actually have better results because it will really stay in place. We're going to be cutting the glue off when we cut a 1/4 inch away, so it's not going to be in our quilt seam. And when you're using it, just determine how much is best for you. But when you look at it, you don't want to see the front from the back or the back from the front. So you see this little white, it's moved a little bit too much. Move it back. And so when you sew, it should be completely accurate. Now we're going to trim a 1/4 inch away. So you just put the 1/4 inch line on your ruler right on your stitched line. And you can see I placed the glue. When I pull this off, you can see all the glue is going away. If there's a tiny bit left, it's not going to hurt your quilt. We're going to set our seams and press to the outside. Now we're going to take a fabric S rectangle, a fabric O square, sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam. That's super easy. You're going to press towards your white. It's going to look like this. Then you're going to take your unit you made on page 3, and then you're going to take your pumpkin. Make sure your dark gray is on the top. Put those right sides together, and then I'm going to pin on each end first. Right here, this orange and gray, the seam will nest, so you'll just kind of make that nest. Put a pin right in that seam. Do the same thing over here, and then hopefully the seam right here will line up. We're going to just sew it and see if it works. And you can see that my points lined up. I didn't even have to pin there. And that's what you get when you do accurate cutting and accurate pinning. So we're going to set our seams, press toward the top, which is our hands. And it's looking really nice and spooky. So now that I've got the hands and the pumpkin, I'm going to attach the left part. I'm going to put these right sides together, making sure I've got everything the right direction. Pin on each side. And right here, I want to point out, you can tell this is not 100% perfectly straight. So to get that straight, I'm just gonna do this. It's gonna give me an accurate result. And then when I pin, there won't be anything out of place there. So with a 1/4 inch seam, press towards the skinny part. Now we're going to take a fabric K and a fabric C square, and we're going to make 2 half square triangles. We're going to put those right sides together. I'm going to use the Creative Grid Seam Align tool. It makes it so much easier, and I will explain how you can do it without this tool also. So if you don't want to use this tool, what this tool does is it gives you this center line that you line up your center with, and then it automatically, if you draw the lines, it gives you a 1/4 inch away from the center. If you didn't want to do that, you could just use a ruler, and here's your 1/4 inch. Draw your line, flip it over, and do the same thing. Now here, you're going to stitch directly on the line. That's going to look like this. Now we have red thread. The only reason we're showing red thread is so that you can see the stitches. Then we're going to cut this apart. One of these we're not going to use, so you're going to be left with one of these. And you're going to press towards your gray, and it should measure 2.5 by 2.5. And here, this is going to kind of turn into his tail. So we're going to move this down here, take a fabric E rectangle, take a fabric G rectangle, put those there. Once you sew this together right here, that will become this. Then we're going to add our face right here, and then our treat unit. And it looks kind of funny, but once we get it together, it'll look good. So then you're gonna put these 2 right sides together. Just make sure you've got the gray at the top and the white at the bottom. Put those right sides together. And I prefer to pin and sew where there are less seams. So I will sew with this on top. It's up to you how you do it. Some people prefer to do the other way. I've got the 2 ends pinned. I'm gonna just ease this in, and we're gonna sew with a 1/4 inch seam. And then you will see these seams nest. But first I'm gonna put the G on the right side. Then I'm gonna put this one right sides together, and you can see that this nests right here. So I'm just gonna move it from the right side to the left side, and it'll just lock in place. Pin right there. I prefer to pin up and down rather than sideways, and that gives me a better result, but some people pin sideways, so you can decide which way works best for you. Pin all the way up and down, and then you're gonna sew these with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we'll almost be done. We'll just need to add the hat to the top and a rectangle to the bottom. So here's your ghost unit. It's looking so cute. I'm gonna start by putting my fabric H on the bottom. And here, notice you're gonna have a 1/4 inch seam that will need to match up. So you wanna make sure you really get that with a 1/4 inch seam and you don't chop off his little tail. Then we'll take our hat, put this on top, right sides together, and pin. This block is really easy if you just take it step by step. It's more of just a time commitment to make sure that you have all your fabrics labeled. Everything is a very easy technique if you just take it step by step. And that's how you get such a cute block with all the little small pieces. Now, when you're finished with your block, what I like to do is just look over the front, make sure you don't have any kind of creases, and look at the back and just make sure everything looks flat. And it looks super nice, and now we're all done. So when you're looking at the block, I see just some little bitty slivers of thread. I like everything to be really nice and perfectly straight. So I'm just gonna use a long ruler and just cut And that's going to get it perfectly straight. I'm trying to just cut off anything that's not, I don't know how to explain it, but just take off anything that's not exactly straight. I'm not trying to distort the block in any way. It just gives it that final clean look. And just make sure you're not chopping off any points. And there's our Witchy ghost block. It should finish 13.5 by 14.5. How cute is this little ghost? Make sure you subscribe to the Fat Quarter Shop newsletter and this YouTube channel. Make sure you also remember this is a completely free pattern. I hope you're sewing along with me, and I will see you on the next couple of weeks for our remaining blocks.